I've seen many people literally go off the deep end with what they encounter and what they see. At the earliest stages of people talking to non-human entities and non-physicals, I think goes back to something like 1890 that we have on record. There's 110,000 pages of CIA, Stargate information out there. Everyone out there can do remote viewing or use their psychic or intuitive ability.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Watch Mojo and Unveiled. I'm your host Rob, and I'm back again to talk a little bit more about UAP disclosure news. Today's guest is Daz Smith. He is a remote viewer with over 25 years of experience, and Daz is trained in the military technique called CRV, or controlled remote viewing. Hey Daz, how's it going? Thanks for joining us today.
Hi there, yeah, I'm looking forward to having a chat with you.
So am I. You came very, very highly recommended, I have to say. Not only did one of my personal friends introduce me to your work, but also Richard Dolan, who I had the pleasure of interviewing recently, spoke very highly of you. I know you've worked together. And then through your website, I also found out that you have done work with the Farsight Institute. And I recently spoke to their founder, Courtney Brown, about remote viewing. That was a very interesting interview. So I'm really looking forward to getting into this with you, because remote viewing is kind of a buzzword right now. A lot of people are talking about it. In large part due to the recent interviews with whistleblower Jake Barber, which started with his News Nation interview with Ross Coulthard, and then subsequent interviews that he did. So we'll get into all that. Sorry for this long-winded introduction, but let's start by just talking about your background, how you got into this, and a little bit about the work that you do.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. So I've had a lifelong interest in remote viewing, but before that, I was trained in what I call the classical psychic techniques. So that's the things that most people are aware of. You know, things like clairvoyance, mediumship, and divination, using all kinds of tools like Ouija boards, tarot cards, tea leaf reading. You know, crystals, and you name it. I trained in it for many years before I found remote viewing. So I've pretty much been into psychic stuff my entire life. Started off with the classical training, and then coincidentally at a UFO conference in 1992 in Leeds here in the UK, I first heard about remote viewing. They claimed to have a person on the stage who claimed to work for the US military, and he was being hired to look at where UFOs come from and then try to back engineer where they came from and how the technology worked. And the moment I heard the word psychic spies, I was hooked. And I've literally spent, every year since 1992 learning this process and trying to disseminate as much information about it as possible.
So where does that bring you today? What kind of work are you doing in remote viewing right now?
Yeah, well, luckily, I'm one of the very few people. There's probably only about 10 or 20 of us on the planet that we know of that are what we call full-time remote viewers. So I'm hired or I'm employed by a company called Future Forecasting Group. We've been going for 9 years now. And essentially, it's paid for by subscription. Our subscribers, help fund what we do. But we look at things like gold and silver markets, the S&P 500, and cryptocurrencies, and we look ahead and we give advice on using remote viewing on whether the market is going to go up and down, or if they got a good or a bad feeling. But we also do other things like we do monthly predictions as well. So every month, as we approach the end of, as we say, for example, approach the end of January, I and the other remote viewers in the team would look ahead and see what the top news stories for February would be, and then we would put them out as predictions for our subscribers. So that's one side of what I do, and that's essentially a full-time job for me. But I also run lots of other little projects on the side. I run a couple of other groups, one being what I call the Hellfire Club, and we look at woo-woo targets through that. And yeah, and I'm mentoring on the side as well, so I mentor people in remote viewing. So I'm doing lots and lots of things RV based, but yeah, it's essentially a 7 day a week kind of business for me now.
What do you mean when you say woo-woo targets that you look at with the Hellfire Club? What does that mean?
Woo woo is like the kind of like modern word now for paranormal or esoteric or mysteries targets. So essentially, we look at mysteries targets in the Hellfire Club, and with the Hellfire Club, I essentially went on the internet and I curated the best remote viewers that I could possibly find, and then asked them if they'd like to work on mysteries targets. And we do it in a rota basis because as remote viewers, we work blind. so that we can't know anything about the target. So it's very hard for us as a remote viewer to work anything that we haven't that personally interest us, because we can't, for example, I can't say to myself, I really want to look at the Loch Ness monster and find out what's going on there, because I'm not blind to it. So as remote viewers, we all accumulate a list of things that we'd want to look at, in our lifetime, and that's what we do in the Hellfire Club. We take it in a rota basis. So we work the target. Then once every 8 or 9 targets, we get a chance to set a target as well. So yeah, that's the benefit of that for me, is having remote viewers work the targets that I always wanted to work, and then hopefully getting from them targets back that might be on my list as well. But who knows?
But you wouldn't know that it's your target until after the
No,
process.
everything's always blind. Every target is always given to us, hidden behind a random number, and we don't know anything until it's over. Of course, in the Hellfire Club, we kind of know that the target will be some kind of woo-woo kind of mysteries or something related. So we are a little bit front-loaded in that respect. Normal RV, you don't really know anything at all.
What can you tell me a little about the process of how it works? I know that I spoke previously with Dr. Courtney Brown about the CRV practice, but can you go in depth a little bit about how that works? I know it has military origins, but does that differ in any way from the process that you practice, or is it very much related?
It's very much related. I was in 1997. I was taught CRV, or controlled remote viewing, by an ex-special forces soldier. I was taught that in London over a period of 4 days. And CRV essentially comes essentially from Ingo Swann, who we call the father of remote viewing, because he actually invented the word remote viewing. But during his employment by SRI, Stanford Research Institute, from the years 1972 to 1986, during that period of time, the clients came to SRI, and the clients being the military and intelligence agencies like the DIA and CIA. They wanted a technique that they could, because there was only a certain number of psychics that SRI had under their hood. So they wanted SRI, who was using Ingo Swann at the time as a subcontractor, to come up with a teachable methodology that they could then go on to teach soldiers and teach intelligence people on down the line. And Ingo, after around about 5 years of research, he started in '79 and he finished his methodology in '85. He spent all those years dissecting his own internal processes and then recreating it in what we know today as controlled remote viewing, or CRV, which is essentially a very mechanical 6 stage process where you start off with very basic data at the target, and as you move through the processes, the data and the window to the target expands, allowing more and more complex data to come through to the remote viewer.
What is the connection between remote viewing and UAP that is being spoken about right now? Jake Barber has described what he refers to as psionics in the military, who they have the capability of summoning or inviting UAP to appear, and then they have interactions. Has there always been this connection between remote viewing and UFO phenomena, or is this something that we're seeing more recently?
No, there's definitely always been a connection, and to be honest, it probably goes back way beyond that as well, because you can see many stories going back to the 50s, 60s, and maybe even the 40s and earlier, of psychics that have what we call channeled conversations, or they have communications in some other psychic format with what we call non-physical beings, or non-human kind of entities. We can't prove these beings exist at this state in our science technology, but that kind of stuff goes back, way before modern remote viewing, really, and even the modern wave of UAPs, I'd say, the earliest stages of people talking to non-human entities and non-physicals, I think goes back to something like 1890 that we have on record. So it's always been there, but generally in the background. But those within remote viewing and who practice remote viewing know that even from the early days of, the early '70s, at SRI, they started encountering, potentially looking at UAP type craft and non-human life form, but using remote viewing, which is slightly different than the classical techniques, in that all remote viewing is done within a set of rules or protocols that try to keep it more scientific and testable. So under those circumstances, yeah, from the early days of 1972 onwards, there was this UAP kind of crossover with everything that it was doing with remote viewing, and it also, we have to bear in mind as well that one of the people that is at the core of UAP disclosure, Hal Putoff, was also the person that started the remote viewing program in the 70s, and he saw all the way through to 1985 when he left the program for looking at zero point energy. So there's always been that connection from him as well. Yeah, so it's a complex answer there I have to give you on this. Remote viewing's always been entwined with it, but then again, all psychic kind of connections had a non-human, non-physical life form communication thing going on there way before remote viewing was invented.
There are numerous declassified documents that are readily available with a quick Google search you can access from the 80s and 90s, disclosing programs that the government spent lots of money on, and they wouldn't have done that for no reason. Why do you think this hasn't been more widely spoken about in the public discourse over the years?
It's a strange one, isn't it? I mean, for me, it's common knowledge and everyone that I know, but I guess that's because we're really into the remote viewing side. I don't know how to answer that really, other than there seems to be a strong effort by people out there, all at all parts of our society, to try to keep the knowledge and the use of intuition and paranormal abilities uh, at bay and at a minimum, really. So I really do think it's been swamped. For example, Google right now. If I try to do a search for remote viewing on Google, none of what I would call the most comprehensive, the most credible websites with the most information come up in the first 10 pages of Google. It is almost like it's been blacklisted, but we can't prove it's been blacklisted as a topic. But yeah, I really don't know why the public hasn't caught on till now. As you said, the documents are out there. There's 110,000 pages of CIA, Stargate information out there, and that was when the CIA worked from 72 to 1995 on it, 23 years, to the tune of something like $24 million over those 23 plus years, and that's not a lot at $1 million a year, but, it's a substantial program. And we know that that wouldn't have been continued year after year if they didn't meet the requirements of all the congressional and scientific oversight committees, because they had those each year, you see, and you could see that in the documentation. Each year, to get the funding for the following year, they had to prove that they were actually getting results, and they managed to do that for a continuous 23 years.
So after all this time, what do we know about what they were up to and what they achieved? How much do we actually know about Project Stargate?
Yes, some of it's still hidden. Some of it I don't think would ever reach the light of day. In fact, there are rumors that a lot of the documentation was even shredded at one point. But we know that they had an active program. There was this what we call a code war between the Russians doing this kind of stuff, the Chinese doing this kind of stuff, and the Americans doing it as well. Each country had their own programs. We know that Stargate. It went under many names before that. I think there were around about 6 to 7 names for the programs, and it changed like every 3 or 4 years. It was it had very good results. The official close of it with the CIA come up with a contrived report that there was no evidence of it being of any intel use. But you only have to do a deep dive into the 110,000 pages to find numerous reports from the CIA, the DIA, the NSA, and even drug agencies that were using remote viewers to look for drugs on ships that were being brought in and stuff. That they were getting accurate and very actionable intel for decades. So it does work. But yeah, why it hasn't been more known, I really don't know to this day. I mean, it's getting there now with all this disclosure and psionics and stuff.
So something else that Jake Barber mentioned in a recent interview, and I'm going to keep coming back to him because I have a lot of questions about, and he's being spoken about a lot right now, but it was different methods. This was during his interview with Jesse Michaels. He described various methods for psychics to get into the remote viewing state, which is something that I hadn't heard before, and I thought it was interesting. I'd like to get your opinion on it. There's the through meditation. I mean, this is the most typical one that you would hear about, but he said it can also be stress induced. You can put your body through a stress response to get into the frame of mind that you can achieve remote viewing, or it can be chemically induced with drugs. How can like what comments do you have on that? Are you familiar with these practices? And
If I'm not familiar with stress-induced remote viewing to get you into the state. They did lots of research for this during the Stargate early years. Um, and generally they use meditation, because they sent people on courses to the Monroe Institute where they use gateway tapes, which plays different, binaural beats and different frequencies to try and get you into altered states, alpha, theta, delta. I can't remember which one to be honest. So a lot of people use those general basic meditation techniques. They absolutely work as well. Many of us use those within the remote viewing field. I haven't heard the forced stress. I guess that could work. But the problem is, remote viewing as a process is so subtle that even the smallest thing, like, and I would have thought the stress inducement of it, um, I would have thought that, to be honest, from my experience, that would hinder remote viewing more than help it. For example, if I literally only have to have an argument with someone by email, or, me and my wife have a bad word with each other an hour before I'm doing remote viewing, and then that sits heavy in my head, because I'm constantly churning over. So that would have a negative effect on me remote viewing. So I don't know how they would um, get better results by inducing stress. All the research I've seen so far shows that reducing stress and eliminating stress makes you a better remote viewer. But as I said, anything can, it's so subtle as a process, anything can affect remote viewing. We even think that maybe even sunspots or geomagnetic storms, all kinds of things like where, maybe even solar activity or where the moon phases are. There's evidence to support that even those could even affect, the quality of a remote viewing on a remote viewer on any given day, to be honest.
then there was also the question of chemically induced, like using drugs, which kind of relates to psychedelic experiences. I guess different psilocybin or LSD type drugs. How do those affect a remote viewing experience, to your knowledge?
I don't have a huge amount of experience on that, other than I've done a couple of RV sessions, pretty drunk on tequila and vodka, and I've had really good remote viewing sessions with those because they have kind of relaxed me and gotten because essentially what you're doing with remote viewing is you're trying to get rid of the day-to-day noise so you can concentrate and hone in on as I said, the very subtle signals that bubble up for your consciousness. I do know a lot of people that do smoke marijuana and have tried other stuff, and they've also said that they've had really good psychic and remote viewing experiences off that as well. So I would have thought that they would work. But as with everything in life, we're all individuals. So what works for one person might not work for the next person next to them. So you would have to find what was your kryptonite, or what was your spinach kind of thing from Popeye days.
You mentioned the Monroe Institute, and that's interesting because I know that the gateway process videos are available on YouTube. Like anybody can access that. Is that a legit method of being able to achieve these states? Like, is that something that you would recommend to somebody who would be interested in practicing this?
Absolutely, yeah. I tried it for the first couple of years and it worked well for me. I then moved on to just basic, meditations that I got off of YouTube, 5-10 minute guided meditations. And now, because I've been doing it for so long myself, I pretty much don't need anything anymore. But if I do feel a little bit stressed, for me, I just listen to like soundtracks or classical music. My favorite being the soundtrack of Interstellar. 10 minutes of listening to that with my eyes closed. I'm in a relaxed state. I'm not thinking about paying the rent or whatever bad emails come through, and it allows me just to get into the state of remote viewing as a process. But you don't really need any of this stuff, to be honest. Everyone out there can do remote viewing, or use their psychic or intuitive ability. It's just that if you want to get really good over time and become dependable, then yeah, you start looking into these tools to try to get you into that state, just so that you can get, if you can add an extra 10% accuracy to your RV data, then that that's a huge benefit.
Is there a baseline that everybody kind of has, or does it vary a lot from person to person in terms of the capability? Because
Yeah,
I
yeah,
want to tie this to something else that came up recently, which is a podcast, a documentary podcast called the Telepathy Tapes, which, if you're familiar with that, they were basically doing experiments with autistic children, nonverbal autistic kids, and seeing that they had tremendous telepathic connections most of the time with their mothers, and the results were pretty astounding. So because they had autism, is that something that really augments the telepathic nature of their abilities, or is this something that anybody can really do?
yeah. We don't know in this regard. That's opened up whole new avenues of research, I would say. It's very interesting that they've taken away one sense, I guess, and it's augmented and made the other ones, or at least the intuitive or psychic one, that much stronger. Um, I'd like to see it. To be honest, I think it's amazing. It's a great podcast. I'd like to see more research on that. But we do know that what you are as a remote viewer or a psychic, or whatever you want to term this, psionic or anything, because it has all different meanings and names now. What you are in life, your skills, your natural abilities, and your talents in your general life, you, especially in remote viewing, you bring that into your productivity as a remote viewer. So, for example, I've been a graphic designer of logos and all kinds of web pages and everything my entire life. So for me, drawing and sketching from any dimension or any angle within remote viewing is very easy. But I sometimes find it hard to um, diagnose or look at a person or a life form's body at a target site and try to determine its physical health state. Whereas some of my students that taught, for example, are nurses and doctors, and they're incredibly good at looking inside life forms and understanding their physical state of mind, their mental state of mind, because they've been doing that for 10, 20, 30 years within their day-to-day life, and they have the knowledge to fall back upon. So yeah, I do think that you bring your whatever life skills, your natural things that you hone in life or you come into life with into your psychic practices. And I think that's what the children are doing in the telepathy tapes. But to a degree that we've never seen before with some of the stuff that they're going into with the hill and all that kind of stuff. It's pretty amazing, and I can't wait to see more on that one.
Same here. Another interesting thing on the note of children that Jake Barber brought up or alluded to was that they have used children in the military to basically interact with UAP, ETs, etc.
I have a problem with that one. That's the biggest. I like Jake, and I thought him incredibly credible in the interviews I saw, but that was the one point that I irked me, and it's only because of I spent 30 odd years researching this. The Stargate documents we talked about, the 110,000 pages that were released. I've read every single one of those pages. I have them on my computer, a database, so I can search inside them, for example, for single keywords. So I know them extensively, and I know that just in the Stargate program that went on from 72 to 95, in just using soldiers within a remote viewing program, they had all these scientific oversight committees, but they had kind of like medical oversight committees as well, where they had very strict rules of what they could do and how they could use these soldiers. And I can't tell you how strict it was, but the documents there detailing it. So I find it very hard to believe that any kind of military or rental mechanism looking into remote viewing would use children, because as I said, the human use papers that I saw, just they were so strict for soldiers. I just can't, I just cannot see that being allowed, unless things have changed since then. Unless the programs are so dark, they're so deep, and maybe they are not actually military programs. Maybe they're embedded in some way in some kind of special access program that doesn't have to, it doesn't have to be signed off by anyone in a military way. Do you know what I mean? It might be hidden in such a way that they can get away with it. If it were a pure military program, because I've seen the human use documentation that they had for Stargate, I can't believe that that would be allowed.
Right. Or if it's private companies that are conducting experiments like this,
I think they might be able to hide it and get away with it a lot better than a government organization. Yeah, like the
yeah,
military. Yeah.
yeah. That really struck me as like a moral issue from the things that he said, and I actually hope that more information comes out on that because I feel like that's a shocking statement for him to make and something that a lot of people would draw issues with.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've been, as I said, I've been looking into the psychic stuff now pretty much most of my life. Let's say 42 years or so. I've encountered, and I encounter on a regular basis, people that try to get into psychic work and into remote viewing work. And because they don't have the right mental capabilities or the right state of mind, I've seen many people go literally go off the deep end with what they encounter and what they see, and how it changes their viewpoint in life as well. Because any of us can be the most stable person, but then you actually do a couple of these remote viewing experiments, and you start to physically and mentally accept that as a being, you can go anywhere in time and space. That really does start to open up your mind to huge amounts of new possibilities and realms and experiences. And there are people, it's documented. There are people that can't cope with that. During the Stargate, early days of Stargate, for example, when they sent someone to be tested and to learn them at the Monroe Institute how to do the gateway experience, he didn't state that he was having a mental condition, so they didn't know that before they sent him. And him during the gateway process, he had a mental breakdown and he had to be removed for the entire program. He ended up wandering around the halls of the Monroe Institute naked, babbling all kinds of strange stuff. So we know this kind of thing happens, which is another reason why I would find it terrible. It really irks and upsets me if they are using children to do this because children are very susceptible. And it's this kind of thing that we're playing with it, but it's not a toy to be played with. Really, people can be damaged by doing this. And literally just before I came on, I was just reading an article about some people here in the UK who decided to use CE5 techniques, which is trying to contact UAPs with in a psychic way. All five of them then experienced missing time. One of them went under hypnosis to find that they all had typical abduction events because they called down one of these UAPs, and that kind of thing happens. So I think everyone has to be very wary, and if they are exposing children to that in some manner, that to me would be a heinous crime that's just unbelievable.
Something interesting, you brought up CE5 experiences, and Stephen Greer is somebody who's a big proponent of that. He does these meditation groups to invite UAP, and it's a controversial thing because, in his view, it seems that he thinks all ETs are good, benevolent beings, and then there's many other people who disagree with him and they are wary of the dangers of inviting the wrong type of beings into the situation. Where do you stand on that?
Yeah, I'm definitely against what Greer's doing with that. I think everyone has to be careful. As I said, the experience those people went through with their CE5 and they were abducted. There's enough evidence out there going back decades to show that there are a certain part of the population of the Earth that are being interacted with by beings that we don't know where they come from. We're calling on them non-humans at this current thread. And they are doing, experiments, mental and physical, on these people. And, there are even indications that they might be, taking sperm and ova, maybe implanting babies, hybrids, all that kind of very strange stuff. I don't believe, if you haven't given con consent for that kind of thing, and and so many people go through traumatic damage for decades. I can't believe that that's a good thing, and that's so I don't go with the thread of all non-humans or all the physical interaction that's happening is good. And we also have to add in there are rumors, although they are rumors at this stage of human mutilations, but we also know that there are huge amounts of documented cattle mutilations out there as well, which kind of look like they come from the same kind of being or the same kind of circumstances. So we have to bring all that into play as well. And that worries me because if they can abduct a cattle and then mutilate it, take all its blood, do all kinds of strange stuff on it, they could also just get rid of the body, so that we didn't have any distress. But the fact that they are putting the body back in that kind of state, maybe to cause us distress, that concerns me because that's not the actions of someone that's spiritual and wants spiritual development for all. That's not a good thinking being that's doing that kind of thing. So
Right.
yeah, sorry, it's a long-winded answer there, but it worries me greatly. There's more than enough evidence to show that he may be partly right, and I truly believe that there are good, spiritual, nice beings out there, but I think there's equally other ones that are interacting with us that have uh, different aims that we may not like what their aims are.
The subject of cattle mutilations makes me think of places like Skinwalker Ranch or other places that have high levels of paranormal activity that have been investigated numerous times. And there are reports that people who go to these places and try to experience something that's there have profound effects on them that they can take home afterwards, that they can basically, they end up being haunted, for lack of a better term, and can pass it on to others. So like what other dangers are there when getting into this space of ET contact and communication?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we also know, from the documents and the books that have come out that some of these people that have had close UAP experiences also have a lot of physical damage. So, they end up with things like cancers, which are bad. They end up with diseases as well. So you have to be very careful, what you're doing if you're in a close proximity to like I guess it's the engines or the power sources of these being. Generally, what happens is kind of mental damage, psychological damage, but there are physiological damages as well that we have to be very careful from. And the hitchhiker effect is, yeah, it's a definite thing. We kind of see within a classical psychic training, but also a little bit of remote viewing, those kind of effects as well. Because, as I said, there is an effect, when you open yourself up and you really truly believe and you practice all these techniques and one technique leads to another and you expand your own personal consciousness. The mere act of expanding your own consciousness means you do see more, you do understand more that's coming up around you as well. So just mere exposure to something esoteric on its own can, expand your universe of these experiences. It's just one of the natural facts that happens. And you don't have to have a UAP experience to have that. You can just have a really strong psychic experience that then starts to open up your consciousness. And by opening it up a little bit, it's like opening the crack of the door. You open it up a little bit and the wind catches it and it just opens up more and more and more and more things happen to you.
Is there anything that you can do to protect yourself or kind of like shield yourself from any negative effects?
Yeah, there are lots of classical techniques, psychic techniques generally, where you build like you kind of imagine shields around yourself, shields of energy and all that kind of stuff. There's a very good book called Psychic, I think it's called Psychic Protection. It's a very old book from like 60s or 70s by a woman called Dion Fortune. So that has lots of very what I call classical techniques to build yourself, these realms of protection. And depending on your religious beliefs, you might want to call in, whatever religious flavor you're into to help you, because all this is based around our human intent and our human belief systems. What is almost like when they say in the Matrix film, if because in the Matrix film, when they were believing it was happening to them in the Matrix, it made it so on their physical body. It's the same with everything that's happened around us in the consciousness and everything I and we do as psychics and remote viewers. If we believe something's true, then it generally filters down through our system and becomes true. So, there are several, for example, there are remote viewers out there that believe absolutely you cannot make money from remote viewing or being psychic. And when they try to do it, they can't make money because that's their belief system. So yeah, your belief system massively impacts the universe you create around you because we are almost creating our own individual universes with this.
Yeah, it sounds like you're talking about manifestation in essence.
Absolutely, it's manifestation on all levels. Yeah, absolutely. The most important thing with all that we found with remote viewing and how it works is the intent of everyone involved in the project, including the people that analyze it. Because if they, we find that if you have a person on the team that's analyzing the project and they're really abject skeptics, then that will have a negative effect on the data that comes through at all levels as well. Everyone's involved. Everyone's involved. In fact, we're all involved at every level. All our consciousness are intertwined, and that's essentially how remote viewing works as well.
What can you tell me about other psychic practices, like, for example, channeling or other things versus remote viewing? Like, how do they differ? What other practices exist, and what are the different applications for them?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, they've existed since the dawn of time, really. The main ones being, I would say, clairvoyance. Just trying to see things into the future, and there are many hundreds or thousands of references of that. And you can go to pretty much any city, anywhere in the world, and find a clairvoyant or someone to tell you your future. It's a I don't like using those practices anymore because I find that they don't remove the possibility of other things happening. Whereas remote viewing, because the process is quite very scientific and it's hidden behind blindness and rules and regulations. For me, it's it's a bit more proper because I can prove that something psychic took place and it was the information gathered wasn't by any other means. So I'm very wary of the other ones, but they work. And remote viewing is no different than clairvoyance or channeling or mediumship, clairaudience, which is hearing voices and speaking to people. They're all the same thing. They all come from the same well. It's just that we filter it through ourselves and call it different things. And through remote viewing actually uses all those techniques that I've just talked about, but within the scientific protocol that tries to keep it clean, tries to keep it very scientific, and you can validate the data afterwards. Which the other ones, to the majority, you can't do that.
Right. One thing that Courtney Brown discussed with me was how, for remote viewing, you are in control of your faculties while you're doing it. Whereas with something like channeling, you basically give yourself up to whatever is coming through you, which it makes it so that you don't really have control over what is being delivered, the messages that are being delivered, and it could be anything coming through, like something deceptive or something truthful. You don't really know.
Yeah, and that's the same for like clairvoyance, mediumship, but mainly channeling. When you kind of launch yourself out there into the universe around us, and you start having conversations with, I guess, non-human life forms because they have no physical form. And the majority of the time, because I spent probably about 10 or 12 years doing that before I started in the remote viewing field, and I even wrote a book on it called "Surfing the Psychic Internet," and that was my conversations over 12 years with these non-humans, and I met loads. Some were like alien-like, some were like angels, all kinds of things that we see in lore that's happened around Earth. And I have to be honest, a lot of them that had spiritual intentions that were good for us, wanting us to develop, but there were also some devious ones there that didn't want us to develop. And, not just me, but a lot of people that have tried interacting with these non-humans at a different level, like channeling. There is a lot of information that comes through which does seem to have a trickster element to it. So they are lying and being devious for some reason. And maybe they get a kick. I don't know what's going on there, but there is definitely a trickster element which is removed through remote viewing because, as you said, there's two different ways. And the way I term it is, in all the classical techniques, I'm in a car, but I'm in the back seat, and the process or the psychic thing itself is in the driver's seat. So it's going along, and all I'm doing every now and then is looking out the window and catching something as I'm going along, but I don't have any control. What remote viewing, and especially controlled remote viewing and the derivatives do, is it then switches it around. So I'm in the passenger seat. Sorry, I'm in a driver's seat, and I'm driving along, but I can stop the car. I can reverse the car, I can move the car, turn it right around. I can control where I go. I can turn it on and off, and I decide every part of the psychic process. That's the main difference between classical ways of doing it and the remote viewing way. We are, as remote viewers, in total control of the flow of information.
Something I've been hearing more and more is that we have to get past the question of whether ETs or NHI exist and are among us, and just accept the fact that they are and start asking questions about that. I have a feeling that you agree with that sentiment.
Absolutely, yeah. And as I said, it's not just it's very hard. It's very hard to term what they are. We're calling them non-humans, non-human intelligence at the moment, and they're some of them are non-physical, but there's a huge. I cannot describe how the wealth of life forms that are there in this kind of consciousness that we can all tap into that want to interact with us. It's all different kinds of physical looking beings, non-physical, very spiritual. I've met ones that almost feel like they're demons, but also ones that actually feel like, they are biblical angels. So, you know, there's so much stuff. And even, the fairy tale stuff, you're talking about fairies, trolls, goblins, or sprites, all that kind of stuff. All that kind of stuff kind of exists in this consciousness that is interacting with us on Earth. And, we have very limited bandwidths of vision and hearing against what's going on in the real worlds around us. So maybe that kind of stuff is literally around us, but we as general humans just can't see or hear it on a normal basis.
How many types are you actually aware of or have had interactions with? Because we hear typically about, grays. Those are probably the most popular that are spoken about. Tall whites, I think, are another type, and there's various other sorts that you hear discussions about, even reptilians. Which ones are you personally aware of, and how many do you think are out there?
How many? I would literally say hundred. It's like and I think it goes to that old adage you say, which is very prevalent within esoteric terms, where they say, "As above, so below."
Hmm.
If you kind of reverse it and look at it as below, it's the same above. On Earth, we are so divergent in how many life forms we have. From worms and insects to mammals, everything in the sea. It's a huge amounts of different kinds of animals thing. So if you reverse that, it's the same above and around us interacting with us as well. So I would say it could even be equal in numbers. So what you have down on Earth as humans, as animals and insects, all different types of vertebrae and non-vertebrae, you would have the same above us, but on a non-physical level as well. It really is that big. It's like a big zoo of life.
That would make sense. Yeah, talking about all of the diversity of life forms that we have on Earth, like why would it be any different elsewhere?
Because you've got to remember as well, and this is we know this through remote viewing is when we as remote viewers, like, we sit down and say, "Oh, okay, we're doing the target, we tap into this consciousness." And I think because we don't as remote viewers, like if I'm doing the planet Mars, I don't go to the planet Mars. I'm just tapping into myself and getting the information about Mars. The information about everything in the universe is distributed everywhere in the universe. Um, so all these life forms that they are all around us, they're interacting with us, and for us as any kind of human to want interact with that, we just have to calm our mind and literally just think about it with intent and a way to understand the subtle, because the information as it comes through you is very, very subtle. You have to understand what these subtle words and feelings and visions are, and then get them down on paper. But yeah, it's that complex. It's all around us. It's there all the time, and every single one of us has access to that. It's like a big in. You know what we have with the internet? It's like an internet, but on a scale of 1,000 times more, encompassing the entire universe and all information in time and space that we have access to.
I've heard consciousness described that way as like that's the internet, and it's as if each of us is a computer. So like the Wi-Fi signal is everywhere, but you need to have the computer that's hooked up to the Wi-Fi. You need to have the password and the login in order to access that information, right? So
Absolutely,
so
yeah. We can all do it, as I said. We can all be intuitives. We can all be remote viewers. But again, to different levels. Not everyone. If you play the piano, not everyone. Some of us can play chopsticks, and some of us can play back. And we might be able to get there with practice in years, but that's a kind of different element to it. But we all have capability to access this information and experience it. It's just that as a remote viewer, I've literally just spent, well, I've spent 42 years of my life, but as a remote viewer, I've spent the last 29 re-listening to when I'm doing a target. I essentially spent 29 years really learning how to interpret information as it comes through me as an individual. That's the key to it. I've spent 29 years really understanding the very very subtle feelings and then being able to interpret them into 10 or 20 pages of words or pictures for the client.
How do you respond to people who ridicule this as something that's impossible? It's just ridiculous.
Yeah, to be honest, I don't get a lot of that in my life right now because I have so many. I literally have thousands of my examples on the internet in video form and in paper form that people can see. And because I'm part of Future Forecasting Group, we've been going 9 years on a monthly rolling basis. I'm putting out more and more every month. Like for example, just before this month started, when I was looking, I was in January looking at what the top 5 news stories for February would be. One of my top news stories that I published and put out on X and other places for our subscribers was that there was going to be a crash in the skies. It was going to be with two aerial man-made objects. One of them was going to be a plane, and one of them was going to be something else. And then 3 days after I put that out, we had the DC crash.
Yeah.
So I have a lot of stuff out there where people can see my, as I said, hundreds or thousands of projects where people can see my work. So I don't really get a lot of skeptics coming to me and arguing because they don't have a lot to argue with when I have so much material out there.
So predictions like this come true for you on a regular basis?
Yeah, yeah, pretty much every month. I think me and my guys we predicted a month in advance that there was going to be an assassination attempt on Trump. A few days before that, sorry, a month before that, I think it was for December. I predicted that one of the top news stories were going to be dogfights of planes and unmanned aerial vehicles over America. Of course, we had the New Jersey drones that were going on. I also predicted a month in advance that someone was going to be assassinated on the streets of America, and it was going to be a different assassination because it was going to be two men involved, one being shot in the head and the other person shooting him from behind, and he had a handgun like this pointed at the guy's head. And then we had a week or so after we put that out, we had the CEO getting shot in New York in that exact same way. And it's not like a skeptic can say, oh yeah, but that's a common occurrence. But when I'm writing there's going to be an assassination in a major city and I draw how it's going to happen, you don't get someone being assassinated by being shot in the head and it being a top global news story like that on a regular basis. So, yeah, on a monthly basis, we get these predictions all the time as a group and as an individual.
I just want to go back to the UAP topic a little bit. I think one of the common assumptions when talking about UAPs, because it's been getting a lot of press recently, is that they are of extraterrestrial origin or like coming from basically other planets. But then there's the question of maybe they're extra dimensional, like they could be occupying the same space as us, but maybe just on a different frequency. Where do you stand on that? What are your ideas on where these things come from?
That's another good question, and it's not simple really. I've been tasked as a remote viewer to look at various different things that's going on, like the Tic Tac one, UAP, drone type stuff, Phoenix lights, Roswell, all kinds of projects. One or two that I've tracked back um, do look like they are off planet. Um, but when I've tracked them, because I've essentially tracked them back as they move through the local universe, they seem to have facilities or what I would call forward operating bases on some of the local planets like the Moon and Mars and stuff. So they have facilities there. And then I tracked them back through a couple other waypoints way back far into the universe. So some definitely absolutely were off planet, but other ones I've looked at times as well have been more, I would say, multi-dimensional or interdimensional. But even the off-planet ones had the capability to move between dimensions as well. So this is where it gets all a little bit kind of fuzzy, really. But yeah, the majority of the ones I've looked at, I would say, are not off planet, or not off planet at the time I'm looking at them. When I'm looking at them, because I'm usually given a set day or a set time to look at an event. At the time I'm looking at them during the event, the craft can be physical and non-physical at the same time, and it can be in more than one place at the same time, which is very complex when you're trying to describe it as a remote viewer. So yeah, I'm sorry, it's not a simple answer. I would say it's both, and it's probably even more than that. There's probably even a couple of other things going on that we don't quite know. Maybe even is it trans future? I can't remember what the word is they call for it, but maybe there's a future coming back to visit us thing. I haven't encountered that myself, to be honest. Everything that I've looked at, which has been high tech, that I've been tasked against, is either been dimensional or off planet type technology. Nothing I've seen seems to be us from the future. But you know,
Yeah, there probably is no simple answer for any of this.
as humans, we want there to be simple answers, so we always try to condense things down into being black and white, but it's not like that. There is the black and white, but there's like 50 shades of grey in between. And that's what's going on here. There's everything you can possibly think of is happening.
It's interesting that you bring up Mars because that's something that's kind of going viral right now. Is this image from Mars of a square structure that people are discussing? Some are trying to debunk it, and others are saying this is definitive proof that there was life on Mars, that there were civilizations on Mars. What do you think about it?
Yeah, well, that's coincidentally a good question because I'm literally just about next week, through future forecasting group, to put out a 2 hour video where I've just tasked some remote viewers to go to Mars to a coordinate that was given to Joseph McMoneagle, remote viewer 001, the best in the Stargate unit at the time. He had a look at this location in 1984, and the documents are all out there, so people can get these anywhere on the internet. There's videos as well. And he described the huge pyramid structure and other things on Mars. So I thought I'd use the very same coordinate and send a team of viewers I curated to go there and have a look to see if they could confirm or deny that. And they came, and that's coincidentally in the same week. There's that square image come out on X and everywhere, and people are looking into it. I mean, if you've got the capability, I'm more than happy to share the screens to show you some of their RV if you want to have a look at it.
Sure, if you're able to do that, go right ahead.
Okay, so remote view Mars. This is the coordinate the remote viewers had, and this is all they had was 22840201. Uh, but hidden on a sheet of paper that I had here on my computer, this is the target. So the planet Mars, current time, and the remote viewers to move to the optimum location and position in time and space to sketch and describe the target in full. The viewer will not report any theories, myths, social constructs, biases, or intents, but would only report actual data. If there are any made structures, the viewer will describe and sketch these in detail. If there are no made structures, then the remote viewer will describe only the landscape. And the location was these degrees here, and these coordinates were from the Joe McMoneagle 1984 Mars exploration. And then I put my intent in here as well, because I always, I probably have a bias as well. So this is just to record my bias. And I've seen all the previous Stargate stuff. I've seen my personal remote viewing of Mars, and I've picked up some structures there. So I do have a bias that I probably expect them to pick up structures.
Mhm.
Previous projects on this, Ingo Swann and his friends did Mars explorations. They did three of them from 1975 to 1984. And also the one we're talking about and the one we're going back on the coordinates of was Skip Atwater and Joe McMoneagle exploration of Mars, and they did that in 1984. Now, both those previous projects, four in total, they all said they saw structures on the planet Mars. All viewers were blind to this target. They only had the random target number. This is some of their data of note. It's not all of it. Together, they came up with 400 pages of information on this. So these are just a quick few that I've compiled here for the projection I'm putting together. So as you can see, lots of structural stuff here. This is from Coral. She did some circular. She kind of thought that this was a moving observatory. That over time it's broken down now and covered in dust and stuff. But when it was in use, it was an observatory type place that was moving. Some descriptions here of the event that killed Mars, which is essentially an impact from above that caused a catastrophic event on the planet. All the life forms either left the planet or moved underground into what they detail here in these facilities. It's very hard to see here, but this cave entrance here going into a hill with circular stairs going down here to living quarters underground. So essentially, they went into these almost like bomb shelters underground to get away from a catastrophic event. The other data, as you can see here, is this is some topographical data that the remote viewers came back, all detailing what they seem to be structures on Mars, and you can see there's some similarity to all this with columned Egyptian-looking buildings, and very much the pyramidal structures, which is what Joseph McMoneagle and Ingo Swann and the others were reported, 40 years ago when they looked at Mars as well. And they did detail life as well on Mars. Very tall life that isn't there anymore. Was destroyed in this catastrophic event. And as you can see, these are slightly different styles from slightly different remote viewers with different drawing styles. But it gives you an idea of some of the pages of information we can get. And that's only a few pages from, as I said, I've probably got 300 pages of data with, thousands of data points. And there's a lot of overlap. They all describe pyramid structures. They all describe structures that go underground. They all describe structures with columns that look very Egyptian. And there was a definite Egyptian hieroglyphic feel as well with writing on walls, that kind of stuff. Two or three of them described that there were like bomb shelters underneath ground that these life forms retreated into in the deep past. And there was a catastrophic event that destroyed the planet and stuff. So that gives you a generally a kind of overview of the kind of data that we get as remote viewers.
Yeah, it's super interesting, and some of the pictures of the beings that were depicted do have kind of an Egyptian look to them, which would line up with the theory that the pyramids were constructed with ET help. So that's very interesting.
The data kind of indicates that some of them might have gotten away from the catastrophe and then ended up here on Earth in different areas of the planet and so on. Again, we can't corroborate any of this because we haven't got the capability to go to Mars. But you now have my group, and I've done other stuff in between, and I've collected other remote viewers group. But my group that's just done this big project, Joe McMoneagle that did the project in '84, and Ingo Swann that did 3 projects from '74 to '84. All with pretty well-known remote viewers, all with the same data. Well, I will show some of the data in the main production that I do, but all the data corroborates, and it's all saying the exact same things that there are broken, decrepit, man-made structures on Mars, and with that latest photograph that you've got as well, with the square structure that's on X. That kind of that's replicated in some of the drawings I got from the remote viewers that have just done this project as well.
Wow, amazing. Are there any remote views that you've done that really marked you or shocked you in some way?
Yeah, I did one, and it was for Courtney Brown for the Farsight Institute, and it was looking at the assassination of JFK. Of course, I was blind to the target, so I didn't know what we were doing. And people can see this online because the whole video's live on Whiteboard. I did the video live on Whiteboard, filming myself. So, and it's on YouTube, so they can find this and have a look at it. But during the process of, I knew that someone was being killed. I knew there were fast-moving small objects hitting a life form that was in a moving vehicle or car. And I decided to go off the reservation in doing it. And because Courtney was only interested in the actual shooting event itself and how that happened. But I decided to follow the life form that was being killed to see what happened. And I essentially then spent 20 minutes on camera following a life form through a death process, through going into another realm of being and meeting other beings on the other side.
Oh my God.
And all that's available on video. It's on YouTube. I think it's called The Day JFK Died, remote viewing the day JFK died or something. It's free for people to watch. So yeah, and to be honest, that ended up on the cutting room floor. Courtney didn't want to use that 20 minutes in his film because he was only interested in the shooters and the description of the shooting event itself. So myself and a colleague, Dick Howgire, who runs Future Forecasting Group, we retrieved that kind of data and we made it into our own remote viewing video and put on YouTube because it kind of details what it might be like to transfer light, at a point of death into another state of being. And I find that um, very influential into my life because I didn't know what I believed until I did that, and I still really don't know what I believe. But it gives me a little bit more comfort that maybe there is definitely some kind of process that goes on there.
So you essentially followed JFK's soul through the death process onto the other side. That is incredible.
And you can see it all on camera. I'm there going, oh, there's so much noise, so much commotion, and all his thoughts were like, help, and oh my God, my kids, my wife, what's going to happen with this and the other, and then instantly, like a light switch, it was like nothing, and then but nothingness was a shock, or a shock to me being a viewer of it. But after I got used to it for a few seconds, the nothingness felt really kind of nice on its own. It was really kind of calming. And then I can't remember exactly what happened, but there was some swirling of energies and stuff. And then I could feel these life forms, but they didn't really have a strong physical human shape, but they were kind of coalescing and forming out of the energy around this life form that passed over. And they went to comfort him and join him, but they didn't. They had very loose human forms, but weirdly, even though they had loose human forms, he seemed to know who each one was as an individual. So I detailed that whole process of what happened with that, and I found that quite affecting on my life. But I've had many messages of people who've watched the video said that they've also had a benefit from that as well.
Yeah, do you think that aligns with a lot of near-death experience stories that we've heard? Like, have you encountered stories like that yourself?
I didn't see any tunnels of light or anything though.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't experience that, and as I said, it was almost, yeah, the light switch effect was weird because it was so noisy, and the thoughts that were coming out of his head of everyone, my kids this and my wife that and government stuff this and what's happening and oh my God, I've been shot, and then the instant gone, the shock of that, and then the calmness, and literally the interesting for me with the shock that everything went so fast and there wasn't an action of, oh, but I got to go back to that, I was thinking about my kids, I need to go back and think about my kid. The whole light switch of that's gone, this is something new, kind of. Yeah, you would have thought that there would have been a, oh no, no, but hang on, I was thinking about that kind of, but yeah, I didn't feel any of that in the process. So that was the biggest shock thing for me, the light switch effect of how that would transpire so fast, I guess, so instantaneously.
What's your assessment of how pop culture has kind of presented psychic phenomena to the masses in the form of like movies and things like that? It's a very common thing to see, and everybody's familiar with it, and you hear and see all kinds of, X-Men, Charles Xavier, with like telekinetic powers, like it's everywhere. How do you think that's shaped people's interpretations of these things over the years?
Yeah, I think it's had both a positive and a negative effect, really, hasn't it? Everyone knows that, we kind of all know that psychic abilities exist because we have seen it in pop culture. But at the same time, it's, in the vast majority of cases, in everything you read and see in the movies and books and stuff, it ends up being a negative, and it's looked at as, and it's portrayed as negative as well. Like psychics, are crystal ball readers. It has that kind of negative connotation, which is why I think that the new word that's replacing it all is psionics, because that's kind of sanitized. It's a bit like when they changed UFOs to UAPs. It had a sanitizing kind of process. I think that's what's happened with the changing of psychics and remote viewers to psionics, to give it that new kind of identity and wipe the slate clean. But yeah, I think pop culture's had an effect of being good in that we all know at some level that there are people that can do this kind of stuff and it exists, but at the same time it has tainted it in a negative brush that most of us out there don't want to be called psychics because that's quite negative.
What's your assessment of the current state of the disclosure movement that's happening right now? It seems to have accelerated a great deal in recent times, particularly over the past couple of months. Where do you think it's going, and how do you think it's going so far?
I followed UFOs and ufology since 1989. I've been, I read everything on it. And in fact, I was a UFO investigator in the UK here before I was a remote viewer. It's interesting. I'm worried that there's a lot of narrative there that's being controlled and maybe disinformation as part of the mix, especially on places where I seem to hang out a lot, like X. Seems to be a lot of different narratives there. I'm also worried that all we're hearing from right now are whistleblowers and military people or people that have worked for military and secret projects, and we all know that they signed NDAs. They're under legal, obligations, maybe even pensions being paid for, all that kind of stuff. So I'm worried that it's a narrative that might be incorrect. Saying that, it needs to happen because, from my experiences within remote viewing and normal classical psychic work, I know that they're out there and all this kind of interactions happening. Absolutely. Although I do worry that, some of it is negative as well as some of it being positive. Where it's going to go, I don't know. I do think we're seeing more of it now because of where we are as humans. And I don't think it's any coincidence that at the moment where we see disclosure being looking like it's going to be absolutely possible, is the exact same time where we're at a state where we're creating our own life forms through AI. And, we're very close to having artificial general intelligence and then moving to artificial super intelligence, within a year, maybe 2 years. So I don't think it's any coincidence that we have life forms that look like they've already mastered those kinds of technologies and more, being more prevalent now when we're on the cusp of creating new non-physical life ourselves that have the capabilities to do vast things, with mental capabilities far superior than anyone on Earth. So, yeah, I don't think that's a coincidence. I think they're here because of what we're doing with that right now and the dangers of that.
Yeah, the AI thing is not something that I really considered, but it does make sense when you consider that there has been a lot of ET activity around nuclear installations and things like that. Like our most dangerous weapons, they seem to be surveyed by ET presence on a regular basis. So perhaps AI could be something dangerous to a similar level that needs to also be kind of controlled in some way, or at least moderated by them, and maybe that's why we're seeing this come out.
Yeah, it's I love AI stuff. I think it's amazing times that we're coming into, but I think the rate of expansion over the last 2 years and what we're seeing is so fast that I don't think people are stopping to ask why we're doing things instead of or how we should be doing things. I think it's scary, the rate of expansion. And yeah, so it's just a personal feeling of mine is that that's moving so fast, and the fact that we could create super intelligent beings that are, which may even be conscious and sentient. um I think that may be a greater danger, or maybe not a greater danger to us, maybe a danger to non-humans. I don't know, but it's to me it's not a coincidence that we're on the cusp of creating new life that doesn't come from us and our physical bodies in a way that may impact the universe around us negatively or positively in at a huge scale. I don't think that's a coincidence why they're becoming even more visible as we're getting even more into AI super intelligence.
That's a fascinating thought to end things off with. Thank you so much for taking the time. Where can people find your work and learn more about what you do?
Yeah, they can find me as Daz Smith on X, or I'm called Remote Viewed on there. I have a great resource website where people can actually learn to remote view for free with templates. It's got lots of the CIA Stargate documents on there, free books, magazines, everything, and that's called remoteviewed.com. So that would be the best one.
Great. Yeah, I checked it out myself and I can confirm it's very interesting. There's a lot of great stuff on there.
Thank you.
Daz, thanks so much for taking the time. This is a fascinating conversation. I hope everybody will check out your stuff, your YouTube channel, and everything. And Thank you for watching. Once again, I can't believe the response that I've been getting to some of these podcasts. It's been incredibly positive. You guys seem to be really into it. So as long as that continues, then I'm happy to bring on more guests and keep talking about these topics. So I'm really happy with how it's going so far. And everybody, keep up the good work, and I'll see you again soon.